Good morning, everybody. My name's Andrew Martin. I'm going to be doing a little talk for you called The Links Effect, which is about the Victorian Engineering Connections diagram. And we're going to explore some of the more intriguing nooks and crannies in the diagram. So just a bit of background about the diagram. It was originally created for part of the Suspension Bridge Hawkshaw and Barlow Untold exhibition that we did 2 or 3 years ago. And it was designed to help show that there are connections between engineers and what they get up to. We started out with about 300 nodes in the diagram. It's now grown to something like 17 or in excess of 1700 nodes. And it's spread out just beyond engineering, but also into the way the engineers connected into their wider world. So it, gets into things like architecture and science and art and culture and so on. And it's got a few, just slightly offbeat, interesting little corners. So we're going to be exploring some edges of the diagram, really looking, going beyond engineering into some of these other areas. So I'm just going to switch over to the diagram itself. So here's the node for the Clifton Suspension Bridge. Here in the middle of the diagram, and a fairly busy node. We're going to have a look, just follow down to Isambard Kingdom Brunel, of course, who has all those connections with the Clifton Bridge. So if I ping on him, his node, the diagram, and this may take a little while to recenter on your Zoom, but the diagram will recenter on Brunel. And we're going to go out here to the right, to this little node out here on the right-hand side, to do with Bright's disease, which Brunel suffered from. So we'll just zoom into that node. So Brunel, as many people know, suffered from Bright's disease, which was a significant factor in his eventual death. Quite a few of his colleagues seem to suffer from it as well. We've also got down here at the bottom of the diagram, Rossetti was a sufferer from Bright's disease, and we will encounter him a bit later on in the diagram. But we're going to go to Brunel's friend and fellow sufferer of Bright's disease, Robert Stevenson, who's here. So this is one of the busiest nodes on the diagram, as you'd expect. Robert Stevenson, one of, if not the greatest railway and civil engineer. Lots and lots of things here. We're going to go to something that not everybody knows about Stevenson, is that once he'd made lots and lots of money and became wealthy, he could afford to indulge in yachting. And he built, or had built for him, a pair of yachts, both called Titania. We're going to ping onto those. So there were 2 of these yachts called Titania, both built for him and designed by John Scott Russell, the Scottish civil engineer, naval architect, shipbuilder, who of course has all the connections with things like the SS Great Eastern. And he had the first yacht, Titania 1850, actually burnt down. He lent it to his cousin Robert, and they had a fire accident on it, and the boat was essentially destroyed, although it was rebuilt under another name. So Stevenson asked Scott Russell to build him another one, a bigger one, slightly bigger one, also called Titania in 1853. There's a lovely quote from Stevenson when he was waiting for this second one to be built, where he was complaining about the fact that people kept hassling him for information and asking him questions. And he said, indeed, I feel nothing gives me actual freedom from attack, but getting out of the way of the postman. The sea, therefore, is my only alternative. Ships have no knockers, happily. So that's quite a famous Stevenson quote about his 2 boats. Now, if we have a look at the second one, the second Titania, after Stevenson died, the boat was sold to this chap here in the top right-hand corner of the diagram, William Parsons, 3rd Earl of Ross, Anglo-Irish astronomer. This guy was into big telescopes, and I mean really big telescopes. He built the world's largest telescope, was the largest for quite some time. So let's just have a look at his node. Whoops, let me just put it in the middle here. So he's got quite a few interesting connections. Here's this enormous, on the right here, here's this Leviathan of Parsons Town, this huge telescope that he had built. But we're going to have a look at Mary Ross. No, we're not going to have a look at Mary Ross, sorry, wrong Mary. We're going to look at Mary Ward here on the left-hand side of the diagram. Now, she, Irish naturalist, astronomer, there's a lovely, well, not lovely, actually, there's a rather tragic story about her. She was, has a reputation, dubious distinction, you might say, of being the world's first motor car fatality. I suspect she might not have been the first, but she was certainly a very early one. And she was killed in a motoring accident whilst being driven by Charles Parsons, who's this chap up here, the son of William Parsons, who got us onto this page. Now, Charles Parsons, very, very famous engineer, invented the steam turbine engine and lots of amazing stuff. But he was sadly driving this steam carriage that had been put together by his sons. And Mary Ward was a passenger on that. And she fell off and was crushed under the wheels of the thing and sadly died. Now, Mary Ward is quite interesting in one way in particular. She is the great-grandmother of somebody called Lalla Ward, who, any of you who are old enough to remember Tom Baker and Doctor Who, she was played one of the companions of Doctor Who, co-starred with Tom Baker, and indeed not just a companion in fiction, but also in real life. She ended up marrying him. She was also married to Richard Dawkins, although I have to say not at the same time. Okay, so we've got from the two Titanias to some interesting modern day stuff. I'm going to go back to the Titanias. I use the search function to do a jump here. So here are the two Titanias that we looked at just now. And we're going to have a look at this chap, John Scott Russell, who was the man who designed them. So we'll just visit his node. So John Scott Russell, probably most famous in this context for his work on the SS Great Eastern with Brunel, but also a civil engineer, naval architect, responsible for this thing called the wave line system of ship design. But we're going to follow from him to this ship here on the right that he had a hand in designing, which is HMS Warrior, the first armor-plated iron-hulled warship. So let's just ping onto Warrior's node. Lots of interesting connections with Warrior. In fact, quite a few connections that link up with other ships, such as the SS Great Britain and so on. But we are going to have a look at where the Warrior was built, which is down here at the bottom of the diagram, the Thames Ironworks and Shipbuilding Company, which was a shipyard on the River Thames. Huge shipyard, actually, produced over 140 warships. So really a massive operation. So we're just going to ping onto their node. We probably ought to have a huge number more ships on this node, but we're going to look at a couple of quirky things that they got up to. Over here on the right of the diagram, we've got the Cleopatra, which is the unofficial name of the boat, if you can call it a boat, that was used to transport Cleopatra's Needle from Egypt to Britain. So I'm just trying to blow this up. You might be able to see it a bit better. So this boat was essentially an iron tube in which the Cleopatra's Needle, the obelisk, was put, iron tube with pointy ends, and it had a rudimentary cabin on the top containing a few Maltese sailors who had rather uncomfortable job of looking after it while it was being towed all the way from Egypt to London. They nearly lost it because they got stuck in a really big storm. At one point, they thought the Cleopatra was going to sink, so they abandoned it, cut it loose, and fortunately, a few days later, after the storm had finished, they managed to find it and restore the tow and get Cleopatra's Needle to London. So that's one interesting thing they built. Another one is over here on the left-hand side of the diagram, which is the Charing Cross floating baths. So this is a set of, and let me try and zoom them up, you might be able to see it a bit better. This is a swimming pool floating on the River Thames, and it was moored just next to Charing Cross Railway Bridge. That's the site of course, Brunel's Hungerford Suspension Bridge. It actually used filtered river water. I'm not quite sure how well it managed to filter it, but anyway, it had filtered river water. They also had cooling systems in it, so in the winter they could actually get it to freeze, and it was called a glaciarium. I think we call it an ice rink. Anyway, so that's another strange and wonderful thing that built by the Thames Ironworks and Shipbuilding Company. Now, like many large companies, it formed a football team, the Thames Ironwork Football Club. And when this football club went professional in 1900, it changed its name, and it became West Ham United Football Club. So we've got a link there between West Ham Football Club, I don't know whether you're a fan or not, going all the way back to people like Brunel. Okay, we're now going to take a bit of a leap to a friend, a very good friend of Robert Stevenson. Whoops, get the right name. This chap here. This is Reverend Professor Baden-Powell, who was a good friend of Robert Stevenson. And he is the father of Lord Baden-Powell. Now, just be careful here with their names, because the professors, the Reverend Professor, is his surname is just Powell. Baden is his Christian name, whereas Baden-Powell, the scouting chap, his surname is Baden-Powell. So we've got something funny happening with the names. And if we have a look at the full name of Lord Baden-Powell, we discover it is Lieutenant General Robert Stevenson Smythe Baden-Powell. So Baden-Powell's Christian names, he's named after Robert Stevenson, the engineer. And then we've got, where does the Smythe come from? Well, Smythe is the maiden name of Baden-Powell's mother. Originally, Henrietta Grace Smythe. Then she became Henrietta Grace Powell when she married the professor. And then she decided, after the Reverend Professor Baden-Powell died, to change her name in his honor to Baden-Powell. And she also changed the name of all of her children, including Baden-Powell, the scouting chap. Now, there is a lovely and entirely unsubstantiated rumor that Robert Stevenson, you can see here, it says he's the godfather of Baden-Powell. This lovely unsubstantiated rumor suggests that he was more than just a godfather. He was actually the biological father of Baden-Powell, and that he'd had a fling with Henrietta down here at the bottom of the diagram. I don't know whether this is true, but there's nothing like a bit of gossip, is there? Okay, so we're going to follow her and see where she can take us to. So Henrietta Grace Baden-Powell, mother of Baden-Powell, her father was this chap here, William Henry Smythe, who was an admiral, an astronomer again, a coin collector, all sorts of things. And if we have a look at him, one of his connections is that he kept a house at number 3 Cheyne Walk in London. Now, Cheyne Walk is a remarkable street in London, remarkable for the number of famous and notable people who lived there in the past, and indeed who live there today. Now, we don't have any modern people on the diagram that live in Cheyne Walk today, but we've got some of the famous people who lived there in the past. So we can see on the diagram here, we've got George Eliot, we've got the amazingly fantastic physicist James Clerk Maxwell, we've got Braemar, the lock and mechanical engineer person. Over here on the bottom left, we've got Rossetti, who we met earlier, suffering from Bright's disease. And of course, we have the Brunels, father and son, at the top of the diagram there, Isambard Brunel and Mark Brunel. So we've got lots of famous people. And on the left-hand side of the diagram, over here, we have also got a couple of painters. We've got, let's put them here, John Martin and J.M.W. Turner. So Turner, of course, really famous chap, and John Martin, famous as a landscape, as a romantic painter. Get my cursor back on here. Romantic painter, engrave illustrator. He's got some amazing connections in this family. He's got a couple of really wacky brothers. But we are going to we're going to follow these guys. If I can just get rid of my thing there. We're going to follow these guys and see where they can take us. And so this is John Martin's node, and we can see Turner here as his friend. They were also, these two painters were also friends of Charles Babbage, the computer pioneer. So let's whiz over to Babbage. Now, Babbage, another node on the diagram with lots and lots of connections, but one of the connections we're going to follow here is his not terribly well-known son, Benjamin Babbage, who is right up here at the top of the diagram. Now, Benjamin Babbage actually ended up spending much of his life in Australia, but while he was still in Britain, he was called in one day to do a report. He's called in by a clergyman to do a report on the sanitation system and the sewerage in the town where he lived, because there was lots and lots of illness, and there was a concern that they had problems with the way the sewers and the drainage systems were being worked out. So Benjamin Babbage was called in to do that. So if we follow his node, we can find out a bit more about that. And the chap that called him in was Patrick Bronte, and the town that he was asked to report on was Haworth up in Yorkshire. And Patrick Bronte, of course, is the father of the Bronte sisters, and indeed Bramwell Bronte as well. So we've managed to get all the way, again, from Clifton Suspension Bridge, a rather tortuous route up to the wilds of Yorkshire and the Bronte sisters. So I'm going to stop at this point because I think I've talked already too much. I just encourage you, if you have some time and you're interested, to take a look at the Victorian Engineering Connections diagram, which is available online at the URL that's on the screen at the moment. So thank you.